We are a community, first and foremost, of MSPs and people around the MSP industry, vendors, subject matter experts, all that kind of stuff. And we're talking about the non-technical side of being an MSP. Now, most of our activity happens in our Facebook group. That's the platform that we've been on the longest. You can join us there at facebook.com/groups/all things MSP. There's about 6,000 members in the group, and somebody is there waiting to talk to you. And we also, if you don't do Facebook, we have a LinkedIn company page. So you can go to linkedin.com/company/all things MSP. Now, last but not least, we also have a YouTube channel. So you can head on over there. This is where you can probably get the best experience watching the live stream because it allows us to interact better through the comments there. But also, we publish a weekly podcast there as well, in addition to publishing it to all of your favorite podcast platforms. But we also post other pieces of content as well. So make sure you go there, you like, you subscribe, you do all the things to make sure you get notified so that you'll know when we post new podcasts, as well as we're doing a new live stream. Now, the live stream is typically every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We try not to miss it, but sometimes life happens. Okay, we got about 19 seconds left before we start the show. We'll see you there. The views and opinions expressed on this broadcast are those of its participants and do not reflect the views and opinions of any employer, MSP, sponsor, advertiser, or vendor. Welcome back, All Things MSP crew. Eric Anthony here with another All Things MSP Live. Now, tonight we have a great show that basically was spawned from a conversation that I started in the Facebook group. But of course, we've got a couple of things we need to talk about first, and that is, of course, our vendors. I did not change out a slide tonight. Ignore that slide. CoreView is our elite sponsor tonight, and they are a system that allows you to manage your Microsoft 365 tenants. And one of the reasons why I think this is important in today's day and age is security. Security is extremely important, and being able to monitor your clients' tenants for drift of configurations or just setting them up properly in the first place can take a lot of time. And therefore, it's something that is really helpful to be able to do when you are managing just tons and tons of environments. So check out CoreView at atmsp.link/CoreView. And then, of course, MoveBot is our premier sponsor this evening. We all have stuff to migrate, right? Files, we have email, we have all kinds of things that, especially when we take over a new client, right? That we need to move from one cloud system to another, or maybe we're just migrating from Google Workspace to Microsoft 365 or vice versa. MoveBot is, from what I've seen, the absolute best solution for this. And one of the reasons I think that is they do so much in the pre-flight of doing a migration that it really helps make sure that the migration is going to run smoothly. Because the worst thing that can happen during a migration is that you start it, you get halfway through and find out that something's not working and you have to start all over again. So the fact that they do all these checks ahead of time, the fact that you can do a migration and then do deltas along the way is very helpful as well. So if you have that need, and what MSP doesn't, to do migrations, check them out at atmsp.link/MoveBot. And if you are a vendor and you're watching the show, we do have our 2025 sponsorship prospectus available. Just go ahead and send me an email at eric@allthingsmsp.com, and I will get that right out to you. We have plans starting at $3,500 for the year. That's not for a month. It's not for a quarter. That is for the entire year. You can sponsor All Things MSP. And then we do have further up sponsorships available, but really all they buy you is more content on the channel, in the Facebook group, etc. Just more opportunities to get your message out to the MSP world. All right. And Yeah, since this is the wrong slide deck, I am going to go ahead and remove that right now. And I'm going to bring up Craig Willard. Craig, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I was doing better until I found out that the slide deck that
Uh,
I tried to pull up earlier is not the one that came up inside of StreamYard. So we're going to try and do a little bit of a swaparoo here and see if we can get that to populate with the right one.
Welcome to life, right? Like
This is what I
this
try.
is what
This is
it's
what I
all
get for trying to
about.
have dinner in between
Yeah,
the
you can't.
regular work day and the live stream. But that's
Mm,
okay. We'll work this out. And by the way, all things MSP Live is very casual. But I would do want to thank Craig. Thank you very much for being
yeah,
here
no problem.
tonight. I kind of reached out to you middle of the day. I don't even think it was this morning, probably middle of the day, to see if you wanted to come on tonight and talk about this, because you were a frequent commenter on the posts and the poll that I put in the Facebook group earlier this week.
Is that a good thing?
That's a very good thing. We encourage participation.
Uh, sure. Yeah, no problem at all. Yeah.
All right. So, oh, this is the right one.
There we go.
So tonight we are going to talk about contracts month to month or annual, and I need to get us through the first couple of slides so that we
Sure.
don't bore you guys to death again. Oh, so Craig, before we really get started on the topic tonight, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? You've been on the show several times, but
Sure.
for those people who don't know you, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yes, Craig Willard with I'm the Chief Operating Officer for SimplifIT, founding partner of SimplifIT. We started in January of 2018. Here we are, I guess, rolling up on our 7th year. Time flies in this space, but I've done everything from nuts and bolts this organization to, you know, everything that it is today. And I've got 2 other business partners in it, and I couldn't have done it without them. So it's taken all 3 of us to steer this ship. But that's really the core of my background for this conversation is the last 7 years.
Yep, and we should say that Eric Elder also
Yep,
commented on these posts earlier in the week, took it in more of a finance direction, which is exactly what I expected from him.
that's right, for sure.
So basically, it all started here with this post where I said, testing a theory is the reason most MSPs want month to month is because just like their customers, they're financially risk averse, yay or nay. And we got a lot of response to this, but Craig, what is your opinion on this, and what does SimplifIT do in practice?
The first time I read this, the first thing that I really noticed was being risk averse. And just from a personal perspective, to me, that was it was a negative of sorts. So it's the avoidance of something. And I've generally we know that when we focus on what we avoid, we generally create more of it. My mindset is a bit more of the other direction and not so much risk averse, but how can I better benefit my clients to make sure that they stay with us for as long as possible? And also at the end of the day, how do I protect profit? So I want to protect profit. I don't want to avoid losing profit. And to me, that is a big difference. And so what it is that I can do that's more in the positive direction, uh, it just feels a little different. But I do, as I said in that response, I know there are a lot of MSPs that feel this. It's not my perspective, and I think it's more of a mindset thing. But I do know that a lot of people feel it.
And I could have said it a little differently, right? In fact, I once, because you and Harry Brailsford also, both called me out kind of on this as being a little unclear, and kudos, because that's what we do here. We have conversations about these things. And thinking back on it, I almost could have said more around smaller businesses tend to be more agile and change direction a lot. And because of that, you have this situation that enters in the picture where you may not want to be tied to an annual contract because
Sure.
those businesses make those changes so frequently.
They do. And I mean, big companies fail too. And I'm not talking about MSPs, I'm talking about big clients.
Right.
So things change. People get too big for what they're doing. They have a change in leadership and they just said, you know what, we're going to bring IT in house. We're not going to pay someone on the outside. We're not going to buy these services from you. We're just going to do this internally or whatever it is. So to me, I think risk averse. I really think what you said probably hits majority of MSPs that are probably reading this. I just see it a little differently, but I think it affects. I think the risk is there for all. It's for all MSPs. Anyone that decides to cut a contract, if they're in a contract, or decide they want to change their business and go elsewhere. A lot of MSPs buy into monthly contracts and they feel like they have no choice because they are trying to get the cheapest rate, and the cheapest rate is always tied to that generally multi-year contract. But you get sucked into where you get a cheaper rate and it causes some other financial issues, in my opinion, or causes other financial things. But then, if someone ever leaves, you're stuck with the expense without the profit. So those dollars just get burned up. So I think it's small or big. I think the risk is still there. It just may affect the smaller ones much more because they may not have the funds or the available operating dollars to cover for it.
Right. And I mean, there's no doubt that there's a lot of opportunity in long-term contracts, both for an MSP and for a vendor. And honestly, I think it waterfalls down to the client as well, because the better price you get, the better price you can deliver to them. Although I'm not a huge fan of that idea, because I think you're still delivering the same value, and I think you should be value driven rather than cost driven.
Yes. I think that's incredibly important for people to think about, and not to get into like the pricing model, but you really should have three little areas that you deal with pricing. One is your cost, one is a margin, one is a value. Some things are incredibly cheap, but incredibly invaluable, maybe even more valuable than half of your stack together. There are some solutions that you could implement that could probably alleviate you having the need for the other half of the stack. And they may be your cheapest your cheapest services to deliver. But that doesn't mean that's, so cost plus, the cost plus margin is, it's a good start, but understanding value that you associate with a particular product, like that's big.
Yeah.
So I agree. Yeah.
So obviously I'm kind of playing the part of both host and vendor tonight. Craig is playing the part of MSP, but I did want to bring another vendor perspective to this, and I found one in the comments. Gil Langston, who, for all transparency, Gil and I used to work at SolarWinds MSP together. He was the head security nerd when I was the head operations nerd. And he had this to say. He says, Eric Anthony, I have had to explain this to multiple vendors. Yes, because we've had that conversation a lot, that he's worked for. As I've always felt that month to month with no minimums is what MSP customers want. And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about, is just small business customers in general kind of want that. It makes for higher satisfaction and allows MSPs to grow. I was usually met with the counter argument of, well, we have significant onboarding costs, and MSPs that don't grow or leave early can cost us money. And that kind of gets to what you were talking about with people leaving, 3 months, 6 months
Sure.
in.
Sure.
But I have issue with the significant onboarding costs, because most of these are SaaS applications that are relatively easy to spin up, and there's not a lot of onboarding involved, in my opinion. Craig, what do you think?
If I had to guess, that's just how they label it, but it probably covers all, they're trying to recoup their sales costs. They're prospecting for, people that they never get business with. And so they've spent a bunch of money trying to get that up. And so that when they do get one, they just throw this, maybe they do throw an onboarding fee on there. And that helps to at least cover for some of that. There's certainly, I would guess that most of them, if they really put that down on paper and figured it out, that it's a pretty heavy load for the little effort that they're doing for onboarding for SaaS products.
Yeah. Although, I mean, to me, working in a lot of SaaS companies, uh, that's usually figured into your cost of acquisition rather than trying to offset with some kind of onboarding costs. So, but I love Gil's next line, and he says, "My response was, of course, maybe we should suck less." Which is something that, there are a few vendors out there who could probably take that to heart, and suck a little less. Um,
I think that there's a good amount of people when you so you, let alone the onboarding fee. But when we talk about there are some SaaS products that you may look at using that may not even offer a trial. The only way you get in is to buy in. And to me, that is the polar opposite of what we do as an MSP. We
yep.
do not want you to feel that way, and I would hate for you to feel that way. And I want to earn your business every single day. And so, but there are some products that you must pay to play, and you must pay to play in a the long game of 36 months or something just to get access, not even knowing if the product is good. But if you had, if vendors took the mentality of providing a service that they could lose to a client, they could lose a client on every single month, how hard do you think they'd work to keep those people? How many times do
Yeah.
you have a vendor that wines and dines you until they get you sign the agreement and they're gone? I can't tell you how many times Eric and I have had conversations about any one particular vendor in play that they have good products, but we refuse to deal with them because A, they require these long-term commitments, but they're crappy service. And so you put long-term commitments and crappy service together, or crappy customer service, like you're only cutting your own throat as a vendor.
Yeah. And you mentioned it earlier. You like the month-to-month model for an MSP because it forces you month after month to do your best for that client
Yeah,
in order to retain them. And I think that's something that vendors should understand as well. And I think it brings more of a, let's call it a pure motive to the space when you have to earn that business month after month. But I think that a lot of larger vendors, and I'm just going to call it generically Wall Street, doesn't think that way.
for sure. Well, and they've got venture backing or something of that nature, and at the end of the day, and it is all about money. Let's not joke. I mean, MSPs are built because we want to make money, and that's great. But we also want to do good by what we do, and that's sometimes when you have a catch with some vendors is you don't feel that way. There are some vendors, and I'll call them out, like Breach Secure Now is one of them. It's month to month, and it is. I will I will throw my money to Breach Secure Now for instead of going with a product that's 10 times better, but requires me to have a contract. Why? Because they get it. And they
Yeah.
understand that our business ebbs and flows, and the best they can do for us is to earn our business every month, and they do. And that means something.
Yeah. And, I think part of this comes down to convenience for the MSP. The MSP likes the convenience, the client likes the convenience. And what I can never get over to a vendor is that they are willing to pay more for that convenience.
So what do you mean by that?
So the convenience of being able to go month to month, it's just like Microsoft, right? With Microsoft 365, they came out with these annual contracts. If you wanted to stay with the current price, you had
Yeah.
to do an annual contract.
Yeah.
But we now offer this month to month. It's just at a higher price.
Yes. Well, yeah. And there's two parts to that thing that are kind of interesting. One is, yes, that you can suck someone into a contract that way, because when it's not uncommon, and especially in the MSP space, it's not uncommon to see somebody looking for the cheapest thing. Like they're literally looking for what's the cheapest antivirus out there. They don't understand the true value of looking for the right antivirus and sticking to the right rate. But when you're looking for the cheapest, as we talked about earlier, is when you're a margin, your cost plus margin, if you get that 3-year contract, you're probably not putting the original rate that you could have gotten it on a 1 year or a month to month, and then multiplying that out as your margin to get your price. You're using the $3, and so you're almost cutting your own self in profit because you're using the lower numbers with the commitment that you made. You're using the lower cost to multiply that out, and your value still should be the same. But you probably, if most MSPs looked at their their financials, they're probably not doing that. They're probably just using the number that they're charged. And maybe in the back end, the accounting department doesn't even know they made the deal. They just know the price is $3 per endpoint. They didn't realize that it was 7 until we turned them down to 3. And and maybe the margin should be on the 7. So I think sometimes we don't realize how much we cut our own financial gains by going to long-term contracts to make things cheap. And if you're looking at clients that love cheap, that's a different type of model.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between somebody who just wants the cheapest thing and somebody who just wants it to work. And I think the people who just want it to work, if they're a small business and they want to maintain agility, they're going to be okay with a higher price to afford that agility, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, there definitely are people that are worried about rates, and there are people that are not, and to not to get into the sales and marketing side of that, but if people are questioning you about your rate, your call, the charges, whatever it costs for your MSP to deliver the services, you either haven't proven the value to them, or there was a miss in the sales prospect, the sales perspective, that they don't understand why you are expensive. You really should hear them say, they either want that kind of service and they can't afford it, or they're not quite there yet, or let's get it.
Yeah.
So like that, but that's not all MSPs are in the same place, and not all MSPs are equal. There's so many different flavors of it.
And not all MSP clients are in the same space.
That is a fact.
Gil closed out his comment with this. He says, sure, they should offer yearly commit options paid monthly at a discount for those who are really bought in. And that's a theme that runs through a lot of the comments, right? People are willing to sign annual agreements or 2-year agreements or 3-year agreements to get that price and maximize their cost savings. But there's another thing that he added in here, and he said, after successful integration into their stack. And
that's
this is another thing that ran as a theme throughout this whole thing, was how many times people mentioned they tried something and it failed, so they had to go back to something else, but they had an annual contract, so they were stuck. Uncle Marv is here, so I'm going to go ahead and pop up his comment. He says Uncle Marv loves monthly.
Night.
Yep. And Uncle Marv, if you're still here, I didn't see that you have a show tonight. I'm so sad about that because I wasn't able to promote it. But here's where, a couple of those comments got into the last statement we talked about with Gil, where, the stack kind of thing. If you're discussing tools, then I want month to month to be able to pivot to a different tool when the purchase solution falls flat. And, so he does have a live stream tonight. It is the State of the Podcast live at 8. So
there we go.
Tune into that. Sorry, Marv, I didn't see your social media post, and so I couldn't promote it. Next week, I promise. Anyway, and this doesn't have to be like right after you bought a solution. It could be that you bought it, you've used it a while, and then it fell flat for whatever reason. And Danny is saying they audit their stack yearly, but there have been times where things were not as advertised once they were implemented, and we had to make a quicker change. Either things are promised as in the pipeline, or the robust integration is nothing more than a Zapier tie-in. And I think we've all probably experienced something like this.
Yeah.
And, Jeremy Whiteman, said the same thing. He said this all day. If their solution doesn't work as they advertise, then we need to be able to replace that solution with one that does. And I think that's, as fast as we're moving as an MSP industry, I think there's a lot of truth to that.
If you give an MSP the opportunity to do things on a month-to-month basis, prove their salt, and give them the opportunity at any point to commit to something longer to get a better rate, I think that's great because that's options. It gives me the ability to look at something, know that it works, know that I like it, know that I love it, and then I can commit to whatever I choose to commit. Maybe it's commit to a smaller amount, or maybe it's you have to do it all. It doesn't matter. But I do think it's important that when MSPs choose to commit, that they don't forget that they committed to make that better rate. But there was original rate. If it was a month to month or an annual and you went 3 years, make sure that you're tying that to the cost originally, and the benefit of you lowering the rate to 3 years should be yours as profit. It shouldn't,
Correct.
You're giving it to the client, and the client didn't do anything for it, and they're not stuck in it. So you got to make sure you hit that one as well.
Well, and that offsets some of the risk, right?
It does.
Because now you're getting greater margin because the value you're delivering is the same. You're getting greater margin so that if some of those clients leave and, it's another month, 2 months, 3 months before you get new clients to take those licenses on, then you have built yourself a little bit of a cash buffer, and you can weather that very easily if you've built in the extra margin for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you can get something month to month for $5, and then you can get them talked down to $250, you still say the $5 is the cost. The extra $250, it's almost like you get 2 for 1. And so, over months and over clients, like that can be collective in a way that makes the whole contract idea better, at least tolerable. But
right,
if you keep those, go ahead. I'll say if you keep those clients, it becomes very profitable, insanely profitable, because you've just added that extra over however long, either the life of that client, or multiple clients. Like that becomes very, very profitable. And we don't want to lose track of that.
Yeah. I mean, if we put it into numbers, say you commit to 100 licenses. Okay. And because you're committing to 100, you get it at half price, but you keep your cost model the same to your client.
Right.
So your margin is higher. You could literally afford to go down to half of your licenses.
That's true.
Before you eat into your planned margin.
That is as simple as it can get. Yes.
Yep.
And that should be understandable. Like that is a big deal.
And that's how you get around the risk averse piece of it, right? Is you reduce your risk by increasing your margin so that you can weather having a dip in paid for licenses.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Okay. We've got some other comments that I definitely wanted to get to. We have this one from Matt Solomon from Channel Program, if anybody's not aware. He says, interestingly, despite the amount of chatter around month to month, it's not reflective of what MSPs are actually signing around their core stack. In fact, nearly 68% of the contracts are annual. Now, annual could still mean monthly payments, and most of the time it does, but with 1-year terms connected to them.
Yeah. Can you show that on the screen?
Oh, did I? Thank you. There we go.
Yeah. So this is an interesting one. And as most people know, Matt's with Channel, and they look at certain things in a certain way. I think that when I see this, what I see is what the MSP is having to do. This is what they're forced into for many of them. So this is a perspective that just says, our hands are tied. This is what we have to do. It shows you, though, how little, 13% of all of this has some sense of monthly. Now, some of these people may choose one-year contracts and love those, or 3 years or whatever, but like it's a small percentage of monthly. I think a more interesting a chart would show how MSPs feel about these agreements they're forced in.
Right.
Oh, Keith. Hey, buddy. And so that's where I see this, and I think, well, what about the MSP owner side? What about what's the satisfaction of that person that signed the 12.5%? I think is what that says for the 3-year contracts. What's the satisfaction for those in the 2.9 and the, what's the satisfaction between the 13.4 and the 67? I think that would be massive.
Yeah, I think that the 3-year and the 2-year almost have to be, they're okay with it, because almost nobody forces them into a 3-year, right? They may try and trick them into a 3-year.
There are a couple names I could give you real quick that just say this is, we make it so intolerable in pricing that you would not want to do it on a 1-year contract.
Right, right. But I think 1 year is absolutely, that's just the lowest that they offer. And so that's what the MSP is stuck with.
Yeah. Yeah. Like from your perspective, like how do you take that chart? How do you feel about that chart?
I think what most people thought, and that is there's not enough information to really get how the MSP feels about this. And so my take is that the majority is 1-year contracts, because that literally is the way most of these vendors do business.
It is what it is, right?
Right.
Yeah. And so you will find that is a big hit on satisfaction, because they don't, the MSP doesn't feel like they have options. They may have a different, especially if they're looking at a particular product because it serves a particular value. So they may really want it, but they don't feel like they have a choice.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that monthly is as high as it is, because, I don't know a lot of vendors out there who are doing strictly month to month. They're there, like you said, Breach Secure Now is one of them. But I think they're getting harder and harder to find as these vendors get gobbled up by bigger vendors or are backed by venture capital or private equity, forcing these financial terms on them.
Sustainable profit's important, but you can contract people into positions where they just have to close, like they can't afford it. There are situations where some MSPs may not be able to grow, or they commit on a low end, when they're not doing, they're new or they don't have a lot of business, in hopes that they grow to it, and they do enough of that, and it eats so much of your profit you can't survive.
Yep.
I mean, that is possible.
We've got a couple of comments from Keith. No surprise there, but Keith, thank you so much for being in the audience tonight. We appreciate your wisdom, sir. He says, I think the biggest issue with the contracts is the fact that there is not a clause for vendor failure, vendor not updating their software, vendor failing to meet SLA. And I have to agree, especially with these larger vendors, they think they hold all the cards, and their contracts are written very much in their favor.
If you took most of these contracts to your attorney, they would tell you you're an idiot to sign it, because they don't give you a voice. And I think, there probably is some, and Keith's totally right. And there's probably some way you can pull that in front of a judge and say, they gave me no option, but you did sign it, you did agree to it. And so, that just, it is hard. I have been in a very particular situation with a very particular vendor where they promise things, and they failed miserably. And they committed me to 3 years to it, or to us to 3 years. And I told them I was canceling it. They lied. And I had to go all the way up to the second or third in line. It was their chief success officer or something like that. And I had to I showed them, it was a number of bullet points. It was more than 5 where they had failed miserably, and they acknowledged that they did. And they allowed me to get out of the 3-year contract. The fact that they acknowledged it to me, that they knew that they couldn't complete what they said they completed, or what they were doing. They said they could not do these things, and they understood this. It's mind-boggling how vendors treat MSPs.
Yep. And then Keith follows that up with, I fail to see a significant difference in product value to be forced into a bad contract. The secret sauce is the value and service we provide. And Keith is right in terms of, very little of what you're making as the MSP is the upcharge or the margin on these tools. Most of it is in the value that you provide. And so if you can find a vendor that, it's just like you said earlier, Craig, with Breach Secure Now, even if there was a slightly better vendor out there delivering the same type of service or product, you'd stay with Breach Secure Now.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and there's a number of them I do that way, like or we do that way. There are certain, and there are some solutions that Eric is favorable to, and they do the same thing, and we stay loyal to them because they give us that flexibility. It's very important for us. We want good products, but we also need flexibility because sometimes, we don't want our clients to go out of business or to shift models, but sometimes they have to too, because that's just life.
Yeah. And then Keith's final comment here, but probably not the final comment for the evening. He says, I think we as MSPs should demand an out clause for the sale of the vendor. And I think you are seeing this more and more.
You are. Yeah.
I know that a lot of MSPs are actually forcing this into their terms before they'll sign.
Yeah. Well, you're also seeing vendors that are swearing they won't be sold to certain clients,
Yep.
certain companies. And so, we definitely should, demand is hard because I don't know that they would ever, I don't know the flexibility or the leverage we have. Maybe as a whole, we could do that on an individual basis. That may not be so well taken, but I do think that when vendors sell, that should be null and void, whatever contract, and we can choose to stay or go with the new company. But again, totally agree with him.
Yeah. Well, and I've been doing this for 35 some odd years now. And I think we as MSPs, and I keep saying we as MSPs, I know I'm not an MSP anymore. It's just,
you're in the group with us. So.
It's hard for me to not speak about it that way. I think that we have more influence than we've ever had as MSPs with our vendors. I think when I was an MSP, it was very much the vendors held all the cards. Yeah. I think MSPs have taken at least a little bit of the cards back in their favor.
Yes. But you do see, SaaS is incredibly profitable, and security is incredibly profitable. And you're seeing those collide, and you're seeing a lot of new services and a lot of new security. And sometimes you're getting a little confusion in trying to pick a vendor because they kind of do all the same things. And so, if that is the case and you have vendors that are serving the same type of food, then what do you look for? You look for the ones, you want the ones that are secure for sure, and maybe they have, SOC 2 compliance and stuff. But, if I looked at 3 and one of them was month to month, guess who just got our business? Because I'm going to go that route, and I'll even pay a little bit more. I'm okay with that. Because, I'm just going to, I'm going to mark it up and then understand the value and then, charge based on all of those things together. But like sometimes you make the competition easier because you demand such, high entry points. 250 point endpoint minimums is $10 per, and you have to have, a minimum of a 1-year contract, and, everything that you add on, we just high water market, and that your contract numbers change as you add more and more and more. Next thing you know, you're in month 11, you have all these things and maybe some of your business left and you're stuck with that. But that's where you come back to, our model we talked about earlier, which is when you get a better rate because you do some sort of contract, is making sure that you're charging the normal rate that anyone else would be getting. And you get the rest as profit because you're the one that made the commitment.
Yep, exactly. Now, I do want to put this one up from Keith because he's talking about something that we talked about earlier, and that is the term and improving the software are connected. And basically that means, talking about earning their business on a monthly basis. Yeah. Again, like you and I were discussing earlier. So Keith, definitely agree with you on that one. I do not agree with you on this one, though. I am not the oldest one. Well, I'm probably the oldest one on screen. I don't think I'm the oldest one watching the show. But we're close. We're close, sir. And then he says, if you look at Amy B, and he means Amy Babinchak here, she's basically moving to an all Microsoft stack. Interesting to follow her blogs. And this is somebody who has been in this, as long as any of us, and has run a successful business for a very long time. And I think she's probably minimizing her risk by standardizing on one set of tools through one vendor. And yes, sometimes that can be dangerous. I don't think so with Microsoft.
Yeah, I don't think Microsoft is putting all your eggs in that basket. There's probably worse decisions, but you have to be fond of their products, and I'm not fond of all of their products, and I've had some unfortunate non-successes with some of their solutions that I just choose not to ever touch if I don't have to. So, but having a model that's standard is very important, very, very important.
Yeah. And I think that if you can build it around a certain model, it definitely helps. I think in this case with Amy, it also shows that you can do things very differently from other people and still be very successful.
Microsoft, if you want to do Microsoft well, you got to live in it. And I think that's what she'll kill it because of that.
Yeah,
for sure.
And that's absolutely what she does.
Yeah.
There is one other topic that I really wanted to get to tonight, and that is the difference in size of clients and how that affects things. And Kate Schlarf brought this up. She basically was commenting on Matt Solomon's comment that we just saw a few minutes ago. She said, Matt Solomon, this is great data. I think it would be so interesting to drill into based on the MSP size, either by revenue or by employees. My hunch from the vendor side is that pie would look vastly different for a 1 to 10 person shop versus 100 plus. And of course, there's a huge range from 10 to 100. I think even going from 10 to 20 or 30, there'd be a big difference.
I have never seen it. And I'm saying this from my perspective. I've never seen a vendor decide contractually how long they're going to be with us based upon our size. It's never been like they've just got standard contracts. I don't want to make sure I'm reading this as I think she's stating it. So what were you going to say?
I was just going to say that I think from the vendor side, you're correct, right? But I think that the mindset of a 1 to 10 person shop is very different from a 20 plus person MSP.
Yes, I could see that. And the decision processes would be different, obviously. There's probably more people involved with the decision, or maybe there's less and it's in a corner of the office when there's, 15 or 20 employees versus, when there's 3 owners and all 3 make the decision. I don't think the decision should change, though. Just because you're bigger doesn't mean you should accept things because that's what or maybe there's a mindset in the bigger ones that, hey, we're forcing 3-year contracts, so we're fine with 3-year contracts. We're going to suck them into 3 years anyway. And so I think there probably might be, causation, correlation being completely different. I think there may be some more correlation between the type of contracts the MSP delivers to their clients and the type of contracts that they sign. There may be something there. I could see that. So if I'm always doing 3-year contracts, I don't care about the 3-year contract with the vendor because I do 3-year contracts too. And my clients have to stay with me for 3 years. Although what they don't catch is most contracts are written so poorly, they can be broken so easily. You still might be stuck with a 3-year contract with a vendor that you're probably not in a good position on.
Yep. And by the way, Alex Farling agrees with you. And basically what he comes down to is it's more about those larger MSPs are buying more like their mid-market and enterprise customers.
Yeah.
And those mid-market and enterprise customers are used to longer term contracts.
Yeah.
And so I think you're exactly right. I think it's a reverse waterfall how the client is comfortable with a term, so is the MSP comfortable with the terms with their vendors.
It's the air they breathe.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Completely agree.
I totally agree with that. I don't know that it should be right. And I don't know that just because people do it, they should, people, other, you know, I don't know just because it's done should be the way that it's done. And I have a tendency to go the opposite direction from every normal path. And so, that doesn't mean that that's right either. So,
Well, I think it comes down to the individuality of the MSP.
yeah.
And it's exactly what we were talking about earlier, right? Knowing to not take that savings that you got from signing a 1, 2, or 3-year contract and passing that down to the customer. Knowing to build that into your margin so that you are absorbing the risk, worst case, okay, but you're actually increasing your upside. That's actually a smart business decision, in my opinion.
If you
It
do
goes
that.
back to the if you're buying 100, but you can afford to only be selling 50, you're in
Yes.
really good shape if you're selling 75 or 100.
You just have to be able to add that margin. You have to be able to say no to yourself and to your accounting. Look, I know it says that I get this for $3, but the original agreement was they were going to start us at $5. And so if I do that, that's $2 difference. If I multiply that number by 4, that's an $8, that's an $8 miss on a single client on a single device. You start multiplying that out, and that's hundreds, if not thousands of dollars over your whole organization for one small miss.
Right.
And that's massive. But yes, it does give you more flexibility.
And Keith says, I think at times we put too much focus on user size. The ports that he services are under 30 devices and 15 direct users, as an example, and pay well above the industry average. I mean, Keith, your model is so much probably more mature than a lot of MSPs that are still struggling with the transition from break fix to MSP, right? I totally agree that your value-based outcome is the best way for an MSP to go.
Yeah.
I just don't think that a lot of people have learned how to transition. You could teach a master class in that, Keith.
Value is incredibly hard to put into a dollar because the things that you value are different than the things that I value, and they're not even potentially the same. And what I think is incredibly important for your organization, especially as a security tool, you may not give two poops about. And so you've got to find at least a happy medium that says, look, no matter if this product, I know products that are $2 that will literally save your butt every time you get a bad email you click on. It's a fact. It's $2. But you clicked on that link and you didn't have the $2 product, and that cost you $150,000, or maybe it cost you $1 million. So is that product worth $1 million? Is it worth so then you start having this like internal dialogue with yourself saying, well, where is the value? Well, it's a hell of a lot more than 2. That's for sure.
Yep. And figuring out how to explain that value to your clients is the magic sauce in what Keith does. So unfortunately, we do have to cut this a little bit early tonight because I do have something I've got to get to by 8 o'clock. Craig, really do appreciate you coming on, especially on such short notice.
Thank you. It was a really good conversation. And I knew this post would turn into something, so I'm glad you posted it as well. And for everybody listening, you got to get into these posts, or they get crazy and get fun.
Well, and that's what the Facebook group exists for. The Facebook group exists for us to have these conversations. I am doing my best to spark as many of them as I can, but make them meaningful at the same time. I'm not just going to post to post anymore. They're going to be meaningful conversations.
No, you land them. You do a good job. Yeah. So we look forward to them.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Keith, for joining us in the comments tonight. Really do appreciate that. And we will see you next week. Hey, thanks for watching All Things MSP Live. You can reach me, Eric Anthony, at eric@allthingsmsp.com. If you're a guest, if you're a vendor, if you want to sponsor the show, let me know.